What funny thing happened at school that caused utter chaos for the faculty? Story 1. Freshman year, one of my friends wanted me to run for student body vice president as part of his counterculture party. He insisted in having me as VP, to the point where he got all the necessary signatures for me to run without my knowledge and just went ahead and signed me up. We had to write speeches to get other kids to vote for us, and those speeches had to be approved beforehand by some faculty member, so I wrote a very disparaging speech about the validity and purpose of the student council, laden with curse words and personal attacks towards our administration, thinking it would get screened ahead of time and they would disqualify me. I guess no one actually read my speech and just rubber-stamped it, so on that morning they pulled me aside and handed me a printed-out copy of my speech. I went ahead and gave my speech, and I guess none of the faculty knew what to do because no one stopped me, but they were clearly panicked and furious. I got a lot of laughs and applause. I assumed it was too late to print all the new ballots because when we went to vote, my name was crossed out with a Sharpie. I also got suspended for 5 days despite my explanation that I did not want to run and submitted my speech for approval on time, fully intending to be disqualified. I was also told by some older student council members involved in the ballot counting process that I won by a landslide due to write-ins and people just circling the black line in my name, but I have no idea if that's true. A classic case of I got shown up by a kid who played by the rules, so I'm going to break them to show them who's a real adult. Story 2. In middle school, I had one dude who always loved to show off and do dumb stuff in order to get attention. He was considered a class idiot, and everyone tried to tell him numerous times his stunts aren't either fun or interesting, but he was immune to such advice. Anyway, one day on my way to school, I met him and he says, "Look what I got here." He opened his bag and I saw 2 bottles of booze. Nothing shocking, only we were not yet legally allowed to drink that time. He said he took it from his father. I jokingly said that since he has 2, he can share, and he just gave me one without any hesitation. So my plan was to drink it after school, but he had to show off and started drinking it during class, even spilled a bit. After class, he went to the toilet to finish it and left the bottle there. They attracted to him and we had class meetings about dangers of alcohol, and he had alcohol rehab that same year. Story 3. We managed to pull off an insane senior prank that took a month to prepare without anyone spoiling it. We switched with others for the whole day. Everyone switched with one other person and didn't have to be reciprocated. We had little cheat sheets on where we sat in class and what was going on in the class. We dressed like the other person, went to all the classes, used their name, and would not back down that we were someone else. A lot of us got our parents involved, so when the admin tried to call our parents, they went along with the plot. It got so bad the superintendent got involved, and we ended up having an impromptu half-day and just sent everyone home. More than a few of the staff threw very loud fits. We kept up the whole thing for the rest of the year that we never switched places with someone else, and everyone was just remembering the day wrong. Story 4. We had this English teacher in high school who everyone hated. In my class, there was a class clown we called Big Zach who sat at the back and always got in trouble for talking, laughing too loud, being an all-around nuisance for her. He got sent to detention a few too many times for his liking, and so he brought a bottle of that liquid fart stuff to her class. If you have not had the pleasure of experiencing the overwhelming foulness of that bottle, allow me to fill you in. 1 spray is enough to stink up a room. 2 is enough to clear it. Big Zach proceeded to unscrew the cap and empty the bottle onto the carpet. The stench was so bad, one girl threw up, another fainted, and we had to clear the school. Literally an entire section of the school had to evacuate because the smell was too much. They ended up having to cut out the carpet in a room. Her room was basically almost unusable for the rest of the year, so we moved to a different room. Big Zach got in school suspension for, I want to say, almost a month. I still almost burst out laughing about it to this day. Big Zach's in-school suspension should have been served sitting in the English classroom. Story 5. A class above mine was legendary for a very simple senior class prank. Someone who lived in the farm brought the resident goat in. They snuck it in through the side door into the parking lot from the weight room and just let old Billy loose. What followed was a couple of hours of chaos as this goat ran all over the building, dropping goat poop and yelling at everyone who tried to catch it. You haven't had hilarious until you've heard the principal blurt out from the outside door. "Corner him! No, the other way! The other way! Damn it, where's the lasso when you need one? Come here, you little son of a gun!" Billy the goat was eventually cornered and caught, and the kid who did it got a decent scolding and a detention and a whole lot of laughter from his classmates and several teachers, who were just happy nothing got vandalized that year.
Psst, guess what? This video is sponsored by none other than me and my awesome crew at Rufus Rugs. We're the masters of creating custom hand-tufted rugs that truly capture who you are. Whether you're looking to turn one of our intriguing thumbnails into a rug, for purely academic reasons of course, or you're eager to transform your room with some epic anime-inspired designs, we can get it done for you. These are all handmade by me and the team from Canada. No dropshipping BS here. Real, handmade custom rugs by me and my friends. Click the first link in the description to learn more.
Story 6. I went to school in Brooklyn in the early 2000s, an extremely overcrowded high school. They started having armed NYPD in the building. Not 1 or 2, I'm talking like closer to 8 with a mobile precinct in front of the school. They were kicking kids out every day and they wanted to take our phones, not just for the day but permanently. This led to the student body president calling for a protest and faculty agreeing to announce it over the PA system and say everyone who wants to attend can. Big mistake. School capacity was about 2,000 kids, I think. There were about 5,000 kids enrolled in that school. 90% of the kids decided to go to the auditorium, which obviously couldn't fit everyone, for the protest. It was so packed when the crowd jumped and chanted, "Hell no, we won't go," I think. If you were in the crowd, your body moved with the crowd. Kids started jumping on stage, destroying stuff, pushing the faculty off the stage, and they ran to hide. They started to throw all the debris around. A mic stand, I think, hit the lady who was from Board of Ed, and things went crazy after that. Everyone started to push their way out the building and into the very busy New York streets where at least 1,000 students started to run into parked cars, causing damage to many. The news channels were there. The reporters and camera crew had to run because they started to grab the cameras and push them around. That school, as it was, no longer exists. It was the last graduating class. They turned into like a bunch of smaller schools, I think, today. Not funny at all, but caused major chaos not only in the school, but the whole neighborhood. Me and my little group had our party and got buzzed the rest of the days. Kids these days get a lot of criticism, but it'll never come from me. We were stupid back then compared to these kids today. Story 7. I did not know the amount of chaos this would cause. I did the whole bubble bath and the pool trick. Since our school's pool was huge, I used some cheap 99-cent store bubble bath that probably should have been illegal because the amount of bubbles a 1/4 cup caused could fill a bathroom if you weren't careful. I used an entire large gym bag full. For a weekend, that stuff got churned up every time the pumps kicked in. Eventually, the safety system kicked in and started topping off the pool since so much water was being removed by the bubbles. The school smelled like cheap bubble bath for weeks. This was an outdoor pool in a West Coast city, so it was all very open, not an indoor high school. Pool was closed for months as they had to keep purging the system with anti-foam agents. Wash and rinse. Whole school's PE schedule had to be rewritten to adjust for having the pool closed. I couldn't take credit. It was supposed to be a prank but turned into this massive investigation. Story 8. It wasn't funny, but when I was in high school, there were 2 teachers in the school that were married. I was sitting in the husband's classroom waiting for the class to start when another kid ran in and said, "Hey, Mr. B, your wife is making out with Mr. H in his classroom." Turns out they'd locked the door, but about a dozen kids were looking through the skinny door window watching them. The guy didn't even say anything. He just looked crushed. He just walked out of the class and never came back. I mean, we never saw him again. It turns out his wife and the other teacher had been having an affair and he might have suspected, but having it confirmed by one of his students in front of the whole class was too much. The school didn't discipline the 2 cheaters, but the students sure as hell did. Both of them had to listen to cheating puns and jokes every day. "Hey, Miss S, I'm going to copy off Joe's test. Cheating is cool with you, right?" Kind of stuff. Neither came back the next school year. Oh my god, those kids would have been brutal. You know how teenagers are known for tact, restraint, or good judgment? Add in an inflated sense of self-righteousness and it was probably like that. If you would have joined in the fun, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. Story 9. We stuck a car in the school corridor. In my last week of school, I realized one of the other kids' Fiat Unos was so slim that it would fit through the rear double doors, as well as through multiple tight gaps and gates, and there was a clear path down to one of the main thoroughfares. I think I measured each gap about 4 times. Me and a mate got the keys off the owner, who wanted plausible deniability, pushed it down and then locked it, put full lock and then triggered the steering lock, which was a touch of genius on my mate's part, and walked off. Unfortunately, about 30 minutes later, someone else came and turned the radio on full blast where we had left a window open to be able to push it without sitting in it. So we had to leg it back and pretend to find the keys in a corner and say, "We'll get it out," which was easier said than done. Now upwards of 50 kids and 10 teachers, any of which I'm proud to say looked a bit impressed, now surrounded it. But because we got it out and then vanished for lunch, we got away with it completely. Sadly, both my mate and the car's owner passed a few years later through an accident and illness, but I'm glad to say I know it was us, and it was a good one. Story 10. Our friend was a little twerp from the moment I met him, and he just liked causing trouble. One day he found out he can put his arm in the vending machine where the pop comes out and actually just steal a pop from the machine. He did this almost every day for a month. One day he tried to impress a girl by getting her a free drink out of the high school vending machine. He pulls his sleeves up, sticks his arm in there, and moves it around to find the correct position. His arm gets stuck. He was stuck with the arm in the vending machine for over an hour in the foyer of the high school. Principal, teachers, counselors all showed up to witness my idiot friend be stuck. They had to call the vending machine company and they had to get him out. He then got a talking to by the teachers and they asked him if things were okay at home because he's stealing drinks out of the vending machine. He got roughed up at home and no teacher ever looked at him the same again. Story 11. In middle school, a staff member, not a teacher, he watched lunch and was a basketball coach for high school, got arrested for selling grass to the kids. He won an award for Best Staff of the Year that year, which had an entire yearbook page dedicated to him. But he was arrested after the yearbooks were printed. They had to go into each yearbook and cover that page with purple duct tape to match the color scheme. Prior to him being arrested, I was getting bullied horribly. None of the other teachers or other staff could get the kids to stop, but once the staff who was arrested said, "Leave Spencer alone," the kids would immediately stop. I later realized he was threatening to take their grass away if they bullied me. and that's why he was the only one who could get them to stop. It's sad to see that a lunch supervisor who sold grass to kids looked out for those being bullied more than most teachers do. Story 12. 2 senior pranks in my high school that caused the cancellation and warning letters for future senior classes that pranks were no longer allowed. First one involved the seniors dumping nails in the senior parking lot so no underclass students would park there. Had several flat tires, including mine, since some of the nails crossed over into the underclassmen parking. The principal called an emergency meeting, had the staff call senior students threatening that they couldn't walk or graduate if they didn't come out to help clean it all up. Second prank, which was much funnier, involved several seniors breaking into the school during the night and dumping gallons of Crisco oil all over the hallways. This one was funnier because when I got to school that day, people were all standing outside and the doors were locked and students were trying to figure out what was going on. Looked inside just in time to see a janitor and a coach slipping around on the floor and then both of them falling down. They actually canceled school that day and the only way they could continue school was to bring in tons of cat litter and put in the hallways to soak up all the oil. We had to walk in that mess for a week before they finally got it all cleaned up. But even then, there was still some residual oil and the floors were still slippery, so they covered the halls with temporary carpets. Both of these pranks were in back-to-back years, and my school the next year sent out letters to all parents and students with a dire warning that any senior pranks attempted or otherwise would result in having to repeat senior year. Criminal charges, potentially loss of scholarships, any threat they could think of was in that letter. My senior class discussed it despite the warnings, but in the end we decided not to do it. Story 13. While I was in high school, there was a guy that was a bit of a punk, always getting into trouble and acting out because despite being 17 to 18, he still looked like a grade schooler. Flash forward to a few months ago, he recently had cops called on him while he was walking to work, responding to an unattended 8-year-old wandering the highway. In high school, however, some of the things he did to cause a stir in the school included throwing M80s into the toilet, never proven by staff but rumor circulated that he did, stealing the artificial leg of one of the school staff and throwing it on top of the roof of the front bus stop area. He amazingly only got a 3-day suspension for it. And finally, the one that led to his expulsion. About 3 days after a terrible incident, he brought a large strip of firecrackers to school, lit and tossed them into a large plastic trash can, the square kind with a smaller opening, and then capped a textbook over the mouth of the can. You could imagine what that sounded like. Story 14. Panini Dave. During 6th form, there was a smaller cafeteria for the older students, and there worked Panini Dave. The food services at the school were privately run, and since it was a grammar school, all the food was quite expensive. Panini Dave would understand this and often add extra chicken, make custom food like adding loads of chicken to pasta, etc. For a whole year and a half, I got a free panini. I would eat 2 paninis a day. They were quite expensive. I like to eat more at school due to home stuff. Anyway, Panini Dave decided to charge me for only one day, and that was that for a year. Anyway, as you can imagine, the students loved him. They literally added him on socials, joked with him, and commented on one of my IG posts once. He had a family and was an all-around great guy. Well, one day he was caught taking an extra whole bag of southern fried chicken from the main kitchen to the upper school kitchen. He disappeared and was spotted washing up every day in the main kitchen. There was a small window that overlooked the eating area and he was literally placed there to wash up during lunch hour. Anyway, people were mad. It started with discussion. People I know would mention it and start asking teachers about it. Eventually, the head of 6th form commented that he was moved. Well, someone started a petition. Bring Panini Dave back to Cafe 6. It was well written and had a photo of him. A week later, it was at 2,000 signatures. People were joining in for the bans. Other schools were signing it. People actually kind of boycott the cafe too. Like, I just remember not buying from it for a while because the new lady didn't make them as nice. It charged me over £10 for 2. Eventually, the headmaster commented in assembly, saying to drop it. I think Dave also wanted it to stop. It was protected by a union and didn't mind what the students were doing at first, probably found it funny, but at this point realized it did kind of steal chicken and wasn't bothered. So it kind of faded out. It's been a couple of years, but I still remember Panini Dave. I saw I posted on Facebook about how he unlocked an achievement in a mobile game called Thug City. Anyway, that's the story. Long live Panini Dave. That was one long Thug City ad. They were actually up to this? Dang, they're good. Story 15. Looking back, obviously this stuff is horrific, but it was chaotically very funny to us as kids. My secondary or high school was notorious for being a bit of a rough one, and it was chaotic but in the best way when I was there. Various incidents that happened were, we had wooden workbenches in our science class. Someone poured ethanol over the benches and set fire to it and we got evacuated. Not so funny at the time, but looking back, it was so chaotic it was funny. We all had to write a letter to the lad saying how disappointed we were in him. Speaking of science, it was chaos in general. People smashed test tubes, poured lemon in plug sockets, forks and blenders, tried to burn each other with Bunsen burners. There was some sort of chamber where the teachers did experiments with various dangerous gases. Some lad ran over and lifted up the small door so the gas escaped. Evacuated again. The same lad pulled all the spider plants in the room out of their pots and chucked them across the tables. Soil everywhere. We were banned from experiments and had to use examples from textbooks for our exams and coursework. Maths was another chaotic lesson. The same lad with the plants above brought a bottle of booze into the lesson and proceeded to get buzzed at the back of the classroom. Heavy maths books would be collected at the end of the lesson and then thrown around the room and at each other. My friends and I spent a whole lesson making cat-shaped confetti out of paper and threw it in the air during the book incident like some sort of macabre celebration. Deputy teacher got a lad in a headlock for kicking a football at the wall. Someone pulled a Mooney to the playground from a second-floor classroom to the whole of the playground and got expelled. A girl was chasing people around with a drawing pin. The canteen would sell Beanie Nest Smash, beans and cheese in a container. People would buy these to throw them up in the wall outside. Hundreds of mashed platters. In art, we made these giant paper sculptures. A lad took to throwing them out in the third-floor window. The image of a giant paper dragon just gracefully smashing into the floor. In a GCSE exam, everyone decided to go mad for no reason, and with no prior planning, one person ran out and set the fire alarm off. Everyone then descended into chaos, jumping on tables, making their exam papers into paper airplanes, etc. Bonus chaos, we weren't allowed out at lunch, but some people would bring in wrenches to take some of the fences down and escape to the shop or chippy. They would hide behind cars whilst running away. I put an order in for some chips, but my mate was late back. I was in history and she comes knocking on the door. The teacher answers and she's there like, "Got a bag of chips for Yadrem." We were then checked periodically for various tools to escape. Like I said, diabolical behavior and chaos, but God, it was funny as a kid. Now I'm on a trip down memory lane and I'm crying laughing thinking about the fact that a common chaotic occurrence was that each year, Year 7 students would have to make chocolate truffles as part of their food tech lesson. It became known the truffles were kept in this massive fridge in the back of the class to set. The kids in older years would break into said fridge and eat the truffles. Year 7 students and teachers would go back and find the truffles gone and be very upset. Very mean, but quite funny. There was also a teacher who was chaotic and ended up disappearing for a few months. He came back and everyone was going mad in the playground chasing him upon his return, and the chaos didn't like where he was going, walked into a really heavy double-swinging door and got knocked out. Lastly, in art we had these giant tubs of paste. One lesson, all of these tubes were thrown on the vinyl floor and it was like an ice rink. Everyone was falling over trying to walk around. Teacher got a broom to try and sweep it up and also fell over. Paste was then banned. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy. Parents, what's the funniest reason you've been called into school to get your kid? Story 3 was too good. See you in that video.